I wouldn't say I'm going off on a limb here by saying that the Chicago Street Race has had an interesting lead up to the event itself. From the announcement last year forward. I mean, that announcement came kind of out of nowhere for some fans, while some of us saw it coming, but it was definitely odd. It didn't fit the normal mold of NASCAR, which, to NASCAR's credit, is definitely the goal of this, to try and get new fans, new investors, new people in general who would just outright not be in NASCAR if they weren't in Chicago. And while this has been something that I would say would be positive in NASCAR, the city itself, as well as a lot of fans, seem to want to push back on this. And some have good and some don't have good reasons, but there are crazy reasons that are being brought up at this point. And there are people who are starting to become main characters in the opposition to this. And one of these is Chicago City Alderman Brian Hopkins. When talking to the Sun-Times, Alderman Hopkins had said that the newly announced traffic alterations due to the course were huge, and quote, "There's no questions that the inconvenience will be significantly more extensive than what we were initially led to believe." Now, this is something that comes off the heels of the traffic plans for this, which basically shut down a large section of Chicago during the summer and a holiday event for 6 weeks, which is pretty big. Now, it's also worth noting, though, that Hopkins has been very much opposed to the street race itself. This is the same guy, if you remember, who had said that NASCAR shouldn't be there because it would inspire criminals to do street racing. I don't know about you, but I've been to plenty of cities where NASCAR is raced near or at, and I can tell you that street racing has not really been a main line of concern for people. I get that it is locally for different reasons, but NASCAR is not a viable scapegoat. And let's be honest, he, like many other Chicago politicians, might be upset because he didn't get enough of a kickback from it. Let's be real, that's just how city politics work in a lot of cities, Chicago included with that. And when you look at street racing, politics is intertwined with it. You can try as much as you can to avoid it, but you're gonna have to deal with politicians to be able to race in their city, and that's what NASCAR has been doing. The problem is that, once again, the city, from a politician standpoint and also from a civilian standpoint, is clearly saying no. Yes, there are race fans in Chicago, and to you, I'm sorry that you're being caught up in the middle of all this. But you've seen, for instance, both mayoral candidates had choice words for the event and have seemed opposed to it in its current standing. So no matter who the winner would be, they would probably not want this to happen. And if they oppose it or in some way even cancel the contract, it would probably be really good for their approval rating, especially compared to Mayor Beetlejuice beforehand. And when you look at a 6-week street closure for a summer event and on the 4th of July weekend, which is a big weekend for Chicago, well, you're looking at something that's going to impact the lives of just about anyone who lives near or around it in the city. Virtually any person of power in Chicago has talked about this, outside of Lori Lightfoot, I should say, of being seemingly against it. When you have this many people pushing against NASCAR being there, you have to ask, were the gains that you would get be worth it? Are they worth it? And that's something that NASCAR is going to have to justify. Was all of this headache for just 1 year, let alone 3 or possibly more, worth getting a couple more investors or not? It could be. It very well could be. There are teams probably getting new sponsors from the Chicago area from this. So I'm not going to say right away that this is a net negative. But at the moment, optically, it looks terrible. And it seemed like every reason under the sun has been used for why Chicago is quote-unquote the wrong city for NASCAR. Whether it's demographics, whether it's sponsorship, whether it's pushback, crime, museums. Yes, remember, this is also the same city that has said the noise from stock cars would knock down or damage art at a museum that's really not all that close to the track, even with the fact that there will probably or most certainly be mufflers used on these cars. This will not be a normal NASCAR race, but people don't want to hear that. And maybe that's partly NASCAR's fault for not pushing that forward more. With NASCAR fleecing the city as well, I wouldn't be surprised if this turns into the Nashville Fairgrounds controversy of locals on steroids. This isn't some middle-sized city that's been growing, has a growing sports market, and even a growing racing market. This is a city that has had issues before with street races. Look at the Formula One street race that never happened there. Politics will get in the way of this. Money will get in the way of this. And while so far this year, I think that this race will happen, I don't know if this happens moving forward, even if it's a complete success. But to me, at this point, it's the best interest of anyone in Chicago in power, especially these aldermen, to hype up this event for the local economy, to say that they are supporting it, even if they're not, and play a little bit of politics here, because them going against it is probably only going to shove a lot of Chicago investors, and especially fans, away from going to this race. If all you constantly hear is negative about it, why would you go? And it would help the local economy. I'm telling you this now. I've been going to NASCAR races for almost 20 years now. It's crazy to say. And I can say that 50,000 NASCAR fans a day, which is what's being projected on the low side, will add to any market. Doesn't matter if it's a huge city market like this, the local economy will be boosted by this. Add to this the fact that they have concerts from different bands, old and new, like the Chainsmokers, for instance, and you have people who probably would never go to a race putting their money both in NASCAR and the Chicago economy on getting there, on spending around it, spending for it. It could help everybody involved if they're all willing to play ball about it. That's the issue. When you have people fighting each other 2.5 months before this race will happen, that's not going to help. And that's the big question. With all of this happening, 2.5 months out from the race happening, how will the race itself be? See, I don't think it's going to get canceled. It's too close to happen. You already have the plans in place. It looks like they're going full speed ahead. The problem that I have is that this could be a one and done. And if it's a one and done, it better be memorable, and it better be something that NASCAR fans will love to at least look back on, and Chicago can at least look back on and say, hey, this is a weird feather in our sports history cap. Now, there also is a selfish reason why I want this to work on top of anything. I think it's been pretty clear from what I put on here and other places on social media that I have been skeptical of Chicago having a NASCAR race. And it's not because I don't think the area itself can hold it. I think it can, and that's why I'm selfish with this. You see, I went to the Chicagoland Speedway growing up as a kid. I went there from 2007 all the way until its closure in 2019 in the final race. And I selfishly want this race to succeed because if it does, even if politics screws it up and it's a one and done, it would help this track come back instead. It would help Chicagoland in the long term come back because if there is new interest, or if there are fans who never would have watched a race before this, if they get into NASCAR, they would be more inclined to go out to my childhood track. And I would love to go back, of course, and seeing how it's open again, it's hosting races, hosting events on many different series at different areas of the facility. It proves that we can have this come back soon. And I think the next gen would be amazing here. So say what you want about the Chicago Street Course. I get being against it. I get being skeptical of it. It can help NASCAR in the long term for many reasons, my old track included. Now with that, I want to pass it on to you and ask, what do you think of the Chicago Street Race? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're at it, leave a like on this video, share this video, and subscribe to my channel for more great NASCAR content. And thank you all my channel members for your continued support. And be sure to watch the NASCAR Weekly Podcast this Wednesday night on Eric Estep's channel, tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern. So, until next time, have a good one.